Chapter 21, Future Looping. Just at that moment, the bell rang to begin the noon hour. Being such a nice day, the plan was that the students were going to eat outside on the grass after their games, under the direction of the noon hour supervisors. Within moments the students all had their jackets, sweaters, lunches and assorted sports equipment and were headed to the playground. Asher passed the word on that Grace, Caleb and he wouldn't be able to make it to today's b-ball game. Instead, they were all looking forward to the next part of their meeting with Mr. Badule. Mr. Badule looked a little perturbed as they all sat back down at the conference table in the rear of the classroom. "Is this some kind of joke?" he began. "If it is, tell me now, because I don't really have time for this, no matter how funny you think it is." "All will be clear very shortly," Van replied. "I know you're busy, but I also know that you'll be very interested in what I have to say. It's not a joke. Bear with me for a few moments longer. Often, for teacher professional development sessions, we start with a little icebreaker activity. It helps to get everyone comfortable and thinking creatively." "Okay, I'll play along," Mr. Badule responded, glancing at his watch. "For a few minutes at least." "Excellent. Now, a question to get us started. How would you verify the identity of your older self from the future, if they were to suddenly appear in front of you? In other words, how would you be sure it was actually you? Mr. Badule, how about you start?" "Please, call me Nav." "Haha," Nav nodded. "I'd probably begin with personal questions," said Van. "Yes," Nav acknowledged, raising his eyebrows. "My favorite condiment to serve with food is sriracha sauce," Van replied. "Yes," Nav affirmed, eyebrows still raised. "My favorite color is aquamarine," came Van's response. "Yes, my..." Nav started before being cut off by Van. "Favorite food is mac and morg, better known as butter chicken, and don't forget the garlic naan bread," Van rattled off, laughing. "Okay, enough with the favorites list. This game is too easy. What else could you use to verify the person's identity?" Nav's eyebrows had not come down. He had a slightly bemused look on his face, as if he was trying to figure out a complex puzzle. He continued to answer Van's queries. "Probably my most prominent mole, or perhaps the tattoos you have and the ones you plan on getting?" Van asked. Yes. Again, that's what I was going to say. Is this some kind of trick? How are you doing this?" Nav questioned. "Well, you may be able to figure that out once we've gone a little further," Van added. "So, about that tattoo, or should I say, tattoos. On your left shoulder you have Wolverine and on your right shoulder you have Spider-Man." I know how you're doing this part. You've obviously seen some of my vacation pictures when I'm on the beach," Nav replied, thinking he could finally see how this trick was coming together. "You're a smart fellow. But how would I know about the outline of the Incredible Hulk you have next to Spider-Man? You just got that a few weeks ago and it isn't finished yet," Van countered. Nav had fallen silent and was just staring at Van. "You also have big plans. There's Thor, Iron Man, and Groot, that round out your favorite six. Then there's the cityscape that surrounds them." "How could you possibly know that?" Nav whispered, completely perplexed by what was happening. "Because that's the tattoo I have across my back." With that, Van untucked his golf shirt, apologized to the rest of those in the meeting, and turned, pulling up the back of his shirt. There, all across his back was the tattoo that he had just described. There was also an additional part. Above the cityscape and the characters was a night sky, full of stars and planets. "No way," Nav gasped, sitting back and looking around at all the faces that were smiling back at him. "Let me show you the mole you had in mind a moment ago," Van murmured, reaching up and pulling back a tuft of hair over his right ear. Shocked, Nav stared at the triangular shape in front of him. Slowly he pulled back his own tuft of hair and ran his finger over the mole above his right ear. When he dropped his hand back down, they could all see that it was identical. "Nav, I'm going to cut to the point. No more games. I know you're confused right now, but I also know that you've been thinking that this was possible for some time now. I know that you suspected something odd about Blaze, and you were right. He is actually Caleb's older self from 8 years into the future. I also know that you are seeing the resemblance as you look at me now. Nav, I'm your older self from 8 years into the future. I'm here to tell you that you have a special role to play in improving this world we live in and in ensuring a productive, healthy life for all. I'm not dreaming, am I? Nav mumbled as he looked around the meeting again while pinching his arm and digging his fingernails in. Nope, Blaze confirmed. This is crazy, but I suppose I have been wondering about the possibility of something like this, Nav confessed. I wondered how Blaze knew so much about the future. Now I know. Take a moment to process, Van advised. It's a big deal to accept something like this. No worries. Already processed, I think, Nav stated. When that student mentioned that you looked like I did when I grew my beard long, I must admit I agreed. And when the other mentioned the letters of our names being the same, I was surprised that I hadn't noticed it right away. So, I suppose I was ready to hear something bizarre. You didn't disappoint. Although, I must admit, I did not see this coming. I do have a question though. I'm sure you have many, Van laughed. Go ahead. My tattoo plans involved all the Marvel characters, just as you said, along with the cityscape, Nav agreed, but when did we add the night sky? I know why you ask. Because it was originally a daytime scene you envisioned, correct? Van remarked. Correct. Nav confirmed. Well, interesting enough, you saw it here first. It is my tattoo that gets you thinking about adding the night sky. You've always liked the idea of space travel, so you decided it would be perfect. Van responded. Wait, how does that work? A future idea changes my thinking now. But wasn't there a time before any visit from the future? Just how would the tattoo idea originate? Nav puzzled. Perceptive observation, Blaze noted. Let me jump in here. You've hit upon the concept of future looping. The very first time someone visited from the future, there were no memories of that encounter because it hadn't happened yet. But as time goes on, there are memories. The next time that person is visited, the older self can recall the visit from before. We have found that over repeated visits, slight changes occur. Slight changes that often make huge long-term effects. We talked about this when you left the meeting this morning. Neither Van nor I, who were both part of this same meeting 8 years ago, recalled there being an emergency that took you from the room. We thought, therefore, that the emergency could have been the result of something that had been introduced or changed from the future. Well, you tell me. You're the future people. I wouldn't know if something was supposed to happen or not. The principal was asking me to deal with a developing problem in the morning, with a group of students, since I'm teacher in charge and she was being called away to an emergency district meeting, Nav explained. And her meeting involved what? Blaze quizzed. Some policies being introduced in each school district across the province. To do with earthquakes, Nav went on. At the mention of earthquakes, everyone else in the meeting opened their eyes wide and Van and Blaze started nodding. Apparently it was a critical meeting for this morning since another quake is predicted in this area for the day after tomorrow. Since the new discoveries by scientists have made it possible to know when they are going to happen, the thought is that all the schools need to have a plan in place to deal with each announcement. So, all in all, pretty common administrative stuff. That was the emerge. Wait, that's it, isn't it? Did you folks, or someone else from the future, have something to do with our new earthquake knowledge? The thought had suddenly hit him, and from the reaction of those in the meeting, he knew he was right. You are a smart guy, Nav. I really mean it this time, even though I said it kind of sarcastically last time, Van admitted. Absolutely, Blaze added. It was future information that made the new advancements in earthquake detection possible. The data had always been there. It just hadn't been analyzed or looked at in the proper way. It wasn't like we introduced some huge future tech thing. All we did was point a number of scientists in the right direction. They then did all the discovery work necessary. So, that's it. That's the information that was not known when this meeting first happened 8 years ago. That's why, 8 years ago there was no emergency and Van never left the meeting that morning. 8 years ago, there was no knowledge of how to predict earthquakes and therefore no need to meet to decide on the policies. Van learned of the future during that morning meeting. It was the observation of these kinds of effects from slight alterations made back in earlier years that first led to the hatching of plans to save the Earth. That's what we've been working on most recently. The question we asked was, what are the ever-so-slight adjustments that can be made in earlier years that end up keeping us on the path to a sustainable planet? So, if you were to note a main point of future looping, it would be this: since the future is alterable, you should always examine your actions and consider making positive adjustments that would make life on this planet better for all. No actions are too small. And when we say actions, we refer to social actions as well as environmental ones. This would include all of your interactions and the level of respect you show for others, especially those that are not exactly like you. Celebrate the variety of our human existence that makes life so interesting, and don't be critical of those that are different. It is kind of ironic, especially for folks who love space and the idea of space travel. By improving society and saving the environment of the Earth, we were taking away the absolute need to travel for survival. You may think that would have delayed future exploration. Necessity, however, was replaced by utter fascination once new technologies were introduced and we began to cast our eyes, our imagination, and finally our spacecraft, farther into the depths of the universe. I've learned about some of those new technologies, but have had memories ghosted, so I can't give you more details. You'll have to wait for a visit from one of our much older selves, from farther into the future. Blaze took a moment to catch his breath. Nav looked like something had just occurred to him, as he leapt to his feet. Reaching Caleb's desk, Nav started flipping through the new resource books once again. I knew it. I couldn't understand why I didn't know a lot of the information that Caleb was sharing. I don't know why I never looked at the publication date on the copyright pages of these books. None of these resources have even been published yet. That won't happen for another 6 to 8 years. These are all from the future, written by the future selves of scientists I know and respect from this time period. That was what threw me. Blaze laughed and turned to Caleb. By the way, you might ask the next time you borrow stuff from my office. Sorry, Blaze. As I recall, we were a little busy saving our lives. Wait, next time? Do you know something I don't? Blaze rolled his eyes. I know many things you don't, younger self. That is all such amazing information. So, what now? Nav asked. You will all have roles, if the future plays out the way it shows in my mind, Blaze continued. But you already know that it is alterable. So, you do have actions that you will need to carry forward with if we are to be successful as a species. Not everything about the future, unfortunately, is going to be great. There are evil influences that we all need to be on guard against. We will encounter people who will care more about themselves than the future of our species. We need to be as prepared as we possibly can. At this point, I think you need to ask whatever questions you need answered to help shape your approach going forward. For your information, Nav, and as a reminder to you all here, there will be a series of MAs given at the end of our sessions today. Those are memory adjustments, Nav. Apologies to all the rest of you who know this information, but it is critical that Nav knows a little about the procedures of how we go on from this point. It will not be safe for you, or for those around you, if you have specific recall of events and technologies from the future. So, many of your memories will be ghosted. This means that deep down you will still have the memories and the accompanying general ideas, and they will shape your thinking. But the details will remain hazy until there's a trigger to cause those memory details to surface. Recent developments have brought us around to a system of light and sound affecting memory, so our method for conducting MAs has simplified. Now we use a tool that is not unlike the flashing pen from the Men in Black movie series. Perfect, Nav remarked. Okay, I'm in. But just a question. I don't want to lose all the memories from our meetings. So, can we chat about that before the MA? In particular, I don't want to lose the idea of the night sky over my tattoos. Don't ghost my memory of seeing that tattoo. Blaze nodded while Nav continued. Also, before we get to information about our roles, there is something I'm curious about. Can the travel in time be something that you could explain in a way that I could understand? Well, Nav, how are you with learning from your students? Blaze inquired. We've always been good at that, Van shot back. Already experienced that today with Caleb, Nav admitted. Okay then Caleb, Blaze said, turning to Caleb. Would you like to continue your tutoring of Mr. Badial? Do you want to describe for your teacher why you missed the opportunity to do your presentation yesterday? I think that might be an exciting place to start. Caleb proceeded to share the details of his trip to the future and his understanding of how the Fibonacci spiraling waves worked. He had everyone's total attention, since no one else had lived all the details in the way that Caleb had. When he finished, Blaze thanked him and suggested he just had a few more facts to add about the beacons that were the old-growth trees. Blaze took over. The term old growth is relative, which means that it has different definitions depending on where you are. Most of BC's coastal forests are considered to be old growth if they contain trees older than 250 years. Some individual trees are over 500 years old. In the interior of BC, old growth is considered to be trees more than 140 years old. Down south in California there are giant sequoia that are up to 3,266 years old. The bristlecone pine trees found in that state are the oldest trees in the world, estimated to be close to 5,000 years old. Useful to know. To travel farther distances into the past, the most stable flights occur in the vicinity of the oldest old-growth trees on the planet. There are ongoing experiments occurring in these other areas, mostly from further into the future. He also made a comment about how Caleb's actions, and those of Van, kept things on course for the future. Certainly, you must have known, Blaze shared. If either of you had messed up when you did the last time jump, then changes would have occurred at many points and the future that I see in my mind would have been altered completely. Again, it's that future looping. If you're not careful, things can be made worse, instead of better. Also, I can't say enough about the personal responsibility that each person has. It's up to all of us to make the best decisions at each point in our lives, for our own sakes and for the good of the planet and all humans. Humans are involved in the most exciting choose-your-own-adventure story that you could possibly imagine. So, Van reminded Blaze, Nav has asked about his role going forward. Do you want to start, or should I? Well Van, you've lived it. Why don't you start? Blaze suggested. Van went on to share information about Nav being a leader for truth and facts going forward. He would be one of the main forces to fight back against those that dealt in lies and deceit, by promoting the necessary critical reading and thinking skills required for learning and understanding. He was to help others around the world to counter the spread of misinformation. Van detailed a few of the highlights of his last 8 years in the classroom, in the board office, and with his national and international travel. Nav was overwhelmed, but you could tell he was eager to get on board and make all those parts of the future a reality. To further round out Nav's understanding, Asher, Grace and Caleb also joined in the conversation after being given an MA boost to bring their ghosted memories forward. They outlined their roles that were noted for the future. Blaze emphasized, once again, how important it was for them to put in the necessary work and make the best decisions. Otherwise, those futures were not going to happen. Grace mentioned that Mr. Badial should know that MAs weren't just for ghosting memories and bringing forward previously ghosted memories. What fascinates me, and I'm sure will fascinate Mr. Badial, being an educator, is the learning aspects of MAs. Blaze, can you give us any more details from the future about that? What will people be able to learn through MAs in the future? Blaze was happy to oblige. He went on at some length describing the procedures that were going to make it possible for people to choose from a wide variety of careers, jobs and interests. Nav was particularly intrigued with news of memory implants, not just to do with information, but also having to do with muscle memory and reflexes. It seemed that people in the future could take on some quite unique tasks and be successful. Becoming a race car driver, a professional level golf player, or even an astronaut were within the reach of many. As brain capacity became more fully utilized, entire new fields of study were opening up. Blaze gave a full overview, keeping everyone's full attention. Soon the lunch hour came to an end, and the students returned to the class. Blaze led most of the afternoon clever quick discussion in class. It went reasonably well, except for the parts that they hadn't really covered with any detail. Nav took over a few times to direct the students' thinking to the areas that were going to help them the most. Nav and Blaze were just distributing Survey FL7 and setting up Video A21 to show the class, when two more visitors arrived at the back door of the classroom. Blaze finished setting the video up and started it while Nav went back to greet the visitors. Nav recognized one of them right away. It was the grandfather of Grace and Asher, whom Nav had met several times. He greeted him with the grandfather's preferred name, "Hello there, Grampy Rick." He then turned to the other, who he didn't think he knew, but who looked familiar. Standing with Grampy Rick was a young man, probably in his late 20s. "I'm a colleague of Mr. Van Adderley and also a friend of Grampy Rick," the stranger said. "My name is Albeck, but you can call me Al. We understand that you're reviewing Clever Quick this afternoon. Apologies for being late. Is it possible to sit in for the last part of the class?" "Sure, why not? Come on in." Nav motioned them to two open chairs at a back table. As they slipped in and took their seats, Asher looked back in shock and whispered to Grace and Caleb. They were confused as to why Grampy Rick would be there. They also wondered who the other person was. Nav turned to Blaze. "Could you restart the video from the beginning? For our two new visitors. Class, this is Grampy Rick, Asher and Grace's grandfather, along with a colleague of Mr. Adderley's, by the name of Albeck." At the mention of Albeck's name, Blaze's head popped up and he broke into a huge grin. Albeck returned the grin. They obviously knew each other. While they all sat watching the video, Nav noticed all the glances from Caleb and Blaze toward Albeck. As he sat thinking about it, it suddenly hit him. The names. Could it be? He wondered. No. No way. No way.